Welcome to today's Explainer. Today we're looking at a theoretical framework that I honestly found absolutely mind-bending. We're asking not just where our technology is going, but what it's actually turning us into.
So, let me ask you a question. Have you ever felt like modern technology is literally forcing your brain's rewire itself? Think about the constant notifications, the endless algorithmic feeds, just the sheer density of digital information we have to process every single day. If you've ever felt that overwhelming burn of digital fatigue, believe me, you are not alone. But what if that feeling of burnout isn't just some modern inconvenience? What if it's actually an evolutionary pressure pushing our entire species to adapt?
Okay, let's dive into this. Theorists are actually calling this the next evolution of humanity. We're talking about a massive proposed transition, moving from existing as isolated biological minds into this shared connected intelligence. It's essentially the idea that our species is actively merging with the very networks we built.
Here is our cognitive roadmap for the Explainer today. We'll be looking at beyond passive evolution, enter Homo resonans, the sovereign node, science versus metaphor, and finally, the risks of cognitive speciation.
All right, starting with part 1, beyond passive evolution, and the shift in how we actually adapt. Now, what's really interesting here is the stark contrast in how change happens. For thousands of years, evolution was incredibly slow. It was passive, biological, and mostly just about surviving out nature. But now, we've entered this totally new era of self-directed or autocatalytic evolution. It's incredibly fast, it's conscious, and it's heavily mediated by our tech. Think of it kind of like a computer upgrading its own operating system while it's still running. We're literally using AI, neural interfaces, and global networks to proactively redesign our cognitive architecture. So evolution is no longer just about changing our physical bodies. It's about fundamentally expanding our cognition.
And that brings us to part 2. Enter Homo resonans, the resonant human.
Homo resonans. It's a conceptual term translated from Latin, and it literally means the resonant human. To put it simply, and I found this fascinating by the way, this is a civilizational divergence based purely on information processing. We aren't talking about sudden physical mutations here. It describes a phase of self-directed evolution where human value is no longer defined just by physical strength or even traditional metrics like physical labor. Instead, it's defined by cognitive capacity, emotional regulation, and how well we can adaptively synchronize within a super high-density networked environment.
So how do we biologically handle all this relentless digital noise? Well, the standard biological stress response basically treats massive data influxes and synthetic signals like a toxin. That's what leads to that burnt-out, completely fragmented feeling we all know so well. But Homo resonans, it uses a resonance response. Think of it like a solar panel instead of a brick wall. The nervous system acts as an open transceiver, actually learning to use that dense digital noise and external energy as fuel in data streams. It's all about maintaining internal coherence and stability, even when the external environment is overwhelmingly complex.
Let's move to part 3, the sovereign node, and protecting our autonomy.
Because when we talk about connected intelligence, a very natural, super pressing question pops up for all of us. Are we losing our individuality to some massive digital hive mind? Are we all just going to become brainless cogs in a giant planetary machine? Well, the theorists behind this framework argue firmly against that.
And this brilliantly illustrates the proposed solution, which is the architecture of the sovereign node. Basically, to survive this evolution safely, humans have to plug into shared intelligence without sacrificing their unique identities. Step 1 is decentralization. That means building peer-to-peer mesh networks instead of those top-down authoritarian hierarchies. Step 2 is distinct identity, which is all about maintaining your personal frequency and autonomy. You aren't absorbed into a collective blob, you cooperate voluntarily as a totally unique individual. And then step 3 is internal coherence. That's achieving the self-mastery and emotional regulation you need to process complex data without losing your sense of self to the algorithm.
But for these sovereign nodes to safely exist, the source material insists on mandatory ethical safeguards, and these absolutely aren't optional. They are critical to prevent algorithmic control and social engineering. Participation has to be entirely non-coercive. There must be absolute protection of dissent, non-conformance, and pluralism within the network. Furthermore, AI systems have to be aligned to human flourishing, rather than just raw data extraction. The ultimate goal of this networked evolution has to always be conscious participation, never enforced obedience.
All right, part 4, science versus metaphor. Time for a quick reality check.
So the crucial point here is drawing a firm line between grounded, systems-level science and esoteric metaphysics. On the scientifically defensible side, we have real observable phenomena. We're talking neuroplasticity, distributed cognition, AI cognitive augmentation, and measurable physiological coherence. These are grounded realities of exactly how our technology is actively changing our brains and our societies right now. On the speculative side, however, the source material dips into some pretty wild ideas, like manipulating biophotons or even evolving into crystalline bodies. Now, we aren't endorsing either side today, but I think it's safe to say we don't exactly have scientific proof of crystal humans just yet. Those ideas really function more as symbolic metaphors for the massive cognitive shifts we're currently experiencing.
Which brings us to our final section, Part 5, the risks of cognitive speciation and the ethical stakes involved.
You see, the transition to Homo resonans carries profound, real-world ethical perils. The primary danger here is a species split, which could lead to technocratic stratification and massive cognitive elitism. I mean, imagine a society that systematically punishes people who are simply overwhelmed by informational saturation. We run the very real risk of seeing exclusionary social scoring that's disguised as optimization, where algorithms literally dictate your access to resources based purely on your adaptive bandwidth. It could lead to a totally new form of algorithmic dictatorship, where the simple inability to self-regulate in a high-stress digital environment essentially turns individuals into second-class citizens. Guys, these are immense, historical-level ethical stakes.
And this specific quote from the source material really summarizes the core takeaway for us today. It says, "The evolutionary divide becomes informational and adaptive rather than purely biological. Future civilizations might not select for who is the strongest or the fastest anymore, but for those who can process immense complexity without fragmentation." It's a striking reminder, as our environment becomes entirely digital and overwhelmingly information-dense, our most vital survival skills aren't running or fighting anymore, they are attentional stability and emotional regulation.
Let's see how all of this builds to our final thought. Homo sapiens built the network. But what are these tools transforming us into? As we integrate deeper and deeper with our technology, are we engineering our own replacement, or are we consciously stepping into the next era of human potential? Thanks so much for joining me on this Explainer.